Here to score it for us is the Master of Disaster Public Relations Specialist, Mike Paul.
Mike Paul, known as the Reputation Doctor.
Well, there's a court of law and there's a court of public opinion.
Mike Paul is a crisis PR and reputation management expert. Is all about reputation. Got some tips on rebuilding those reputations.
You first have to be transparent and then be accountable for your actions. He's got to get on the truth train right now. There's no ifs or buts in a true apology. You must speak directly to the issues that you've been involved with. You're going to have an across-the-board solution that is more than words, and you got to have actions.
Today's guest is President Holloway of Rutgers University. Welcome, sir, to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for agreeing to be on Reputations in Crisis. Let's start from that perspective. So there's a lot of issues in the news from a societal perspective, from an academia perspective, and we've looked at some of the issues that are happening at Rutgers. What is it you'd like to start with from a racial reconciliation perspective or diversity, equality, and inclusion perspective? What's the latest news at Rutgers today?
Well, the latest news is a bit hard to say right now because we're really focused on just getting back into class. I mean, we've been remote for so long. But when I introduced myself to the community in January 2020, I talked about a beloved community and and I said this as much on my first day in July 1st, 2020. I talked about the importance of equity as an inclusion as key pieces of this notion of a beloved community, which is not about, hey, we all need to agree with each other. That's one, impossible, two, and it's very unhealthy at a university. But it is about the importance of recognizing that no matter your background, no matter your home language, your racial background, your cultural upbringing, your college-going tradition, no matter what it is, you all have something in common. That's the thing called Rutgers. Whether you're a student, staff, faculty, it doesn't matter what, you have something in common. If we recognize that, then so many of these other moments of crisis, reconciliation, so on and so forth, reckoning, those become less difficult to navigate. They'll still be with us because we're part of society, but they'll become less difficult to navigate. So the extent that I can help that ethos become part of who we are, then we're doing something good.
I think of universities as beloved communities. They are far from perfect, but they are deeply committed to the pursuit of perfection. In order to be well prepared for that pursuit, I feel it is important to be guided by some core beliefs. I believe that everyone in this beloved community has an important role to play and deserves to be recognized and respected for a job well done. And this especially includes those who do the so-called invisible work at a university, assistants of all types, dining hall workers, bus drivers, maintenance crews, etc. I believe that excellence can be found everywhere, and that well-informed and inclusive leaders understand that it can be found in what are historically considered unexpected places. I believe that a recognition of leadership is earned, and that the best way to earn it is to act with integrity in everything that one does.
Well, I think that's a great place to start, and I agree with everything that you said from that perspective. Tell us a little bit about your background. So what was your major in college? How are these issues something that you are very prepared for as compared to maybe, let's say, some other university presidents around the country? Let's start from that perspective.
I was an undergrad at Stanford University. I majored in American Studies. I'm embarrassed to say it, but I majored in American Studies because history and English both had foreign language requirements and American Studies didn't, so I just slid right on through. That's all changed, but I loved being in American Studies, and I loved being in that space because it was a merger of different ways of looking at things, history, English, political science, and that's really served me well going forward. I did some work in public affairs, public policy for a year, then went to grad school, and I'm a historian by training who specializes in the post-emancipation American experience, the focus on African-American experience. And I think given the way where we are in the world right now, the way we are structured, textured, whatever, someone with a sensibility that is informed by being interdisciplinary, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, coming together to find an answer in between, someone who is raised in a history and literature that speaks to people who are often written out of history or written out of literature. The skill sets that come from those experiences are embodied in what I bring to the table. And so I think that's actually very valuable at this point in time.
And the world has, especially the past few years, really heard a different proactive voice when it comes to current day civil rights issues, issues of race, reckoning with where our country is today in dealing with its foundation historically in race and slavery being a part of that. One of the issues that came up recently is a statue that is on one of the campuses that is from, I actually was born in Brooklyn, but I was raised in Huntington, Long Island, so I know the name Walt Whitman quite well because he has a history in Huntington as well. What is the challenge or discrepancy with Walt Whitman and the statue that people should know about?
Well, the statue is in honor of Walt Whitman, who was sort of what I'll call a native son of Camden, not affiliated with Rutgers in any way, but just of Camden. And it was in the middle of one of the few courtyards on the Camden campus, which is a small campus. And prior to my arrival, there were petitions and conversations about how Camden was memorializing, who it chose to memorialize, who it chose to honor. And Walt Whitman, brilliant writer, I mean, really important to the American canon, also, had views that were not unusual in his time, but that were particularly pungent in the way that Walt Whitman could express things when it came to racial matters or racial citizens, Blacks most specifically, and their human capability. It's a tough thing to read for someone who enjoys Walt Whitman's poetry, for example. So the leadership at Camden had an extended conversation led by scholars about what can we do that will not erase Whitman from his important role in Camden, but will contextualize Whitman. And that's an important thing. So the statue is being relocated to what I can best describe as a quiet glen on campus next to this particularly old tree. Don't quote me on the type of tree, I don't know, but one of the oldest trees in the area. And actually, and there will be some contextualizing language, the marker that goes up, that talks about the humanity of Whitman. And when I say the humanity, I mean that in a very rigorous way, because as humans, we are all flawed creatures.
Yes.
And we can talk about someone's greatness and also talk about how they fell short of that greatness in their lifetime. But putting Whitman in this verdant glen, in this space with other with remarkable trees and things like that, really speaks metaphorically to his role as one of our most important literary figures, talking about nature and the environment. So I think it's an elegant solution. But the interim chancellor of Camden, Margaret Marsh, who's stepped down July 1, is a historian like me, and she is very sensitive, just like I am, to anything that suggests historical erasure. We don't want to be in that. We don't want to be in that game. We're trying to do something different.
And to that point, there are some people who take this issue beyond Whitman and go to the name of Rutgers University that historically is named after a gentleman who owned slaves. There are some people that are upset about that. To your point of not wanting to erase, but remember, and I saw one of your press conferences where you were discussing this issue, and you said you're open-minded to hear various views. We're a university, that's important. But at least at this time, there's nothing that is going to change the name of Rutgers as Rutgers University, whether it's a slave owner or not.
That's right. I mean, the fact is we are a very old institution, founded in 1766 under a different name, and the name evolved over time. Anything that old in this country will have the blood money of slavery attached to it. If it's still surviving, it will. That doesn't make the slave economy okay. It's never okay. But we have to be realistic at what the past was and honest about it. And so for me, it is not that I am trying to celebrate Henry Rutgers. That's not my ambition at all. But I will celebrate the institution that carries the name Rutgers which, let's face it, is quite disembodied from the individual. And we will be talking in very open ways about those parts of Rutgers, the university's past, that relied upon forced labor, the building of the first structures on campus. Or we will be honest about the fact that some of the founding leaders of the university were involved in the slave economy. It's hard to imagine how they could not have been, given their standing in the community and the economy that the world was in this, what became this country. This is not about trying to say shame, shame, shame on contemporaries who might have that name, descendants and such. That's not what this is about. We're not trying to wag our finger at anybody. We're simply trying to be honest with the past. So yes, I'm not going to change the name of the university. That's too many things to unpack. The name has value after all. It's not Henry Rutgers University. It's Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, after all. But we're also not going to hide from these things either, because hiding, as you well know, is the first step towards a crisis.
That's right. That's right. And the activism that all universities around the world are dealing with includes technology, includes passionate hearts on various sides of issues. As a university president today, how has the social media and speed aspect of dealing with these issues impacted how you manage and deal with these issues overall?
Well, it's a really important question. The fact is, administrations cannot keep up with the pace of this kind of communication. And importantly, nor should they, in the sense that students or whomever, activists that sign an electronic petition and send it to you, and they want change right away, I'm going to say no. That's the first response, because I don't necessarily know all of the circumstances. They are representing one piece of the puzzle. I need to know there might be 48 other pieces to that puzzle. And my job as president is to try to understand the landscape. Now, people can then say, well, you're moving too slowly, you don't care about us. I'm like, my job is to care about your health and safety, first of all. My job is also to care about the university long term. And if I start making snap decisions, that will actually destabilize the institution and will create more problems going on. I can't just think of none of my solutions to whatever's in front of me is a one-off solution. If I decide something, or any president, that becomes a precedent. Or if you did that for this person, you got to do it for the next person. So it is really about trying to manage decisions, not in real time, but in larger context. And that is never satisfactory to activists, regardless of the issue. I know I lived in that space too, wanting something changed right away. That's just a fact of thing. But social media doesn't, it ignores the fact that we humans are social creatures. We aren't socially mediated creatures. So social media strips the humanity out of the process.
Right.
And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to participate in that, which, look, it's very hard because people, the petitions of 3,000, 15,000, 30,000, you can't ignore them.
Right.
But, the fact is none of those people came to make an appointment in my office. None of the people came to talk with me. Nobody wanted to hear another side of the equation too often, not every single time. Well, if you're not willing to talk with me face to face, I don't see how we're going to move anything, So social media, it's done some amazing things for many people. I think it has actually, we have not as a society figured out how to use it to its best interests, especially when it comes to running something as complex as an institution like a university.
And it can be utilized both proactively and reactively, but at what expense of not studying the issues first?
Exactly. Right? I mean, just think of our current healthcare crisis as the coordinated disinformation has literal lethal consequences for the public. And yet, here we are, and that's social media for you, unfortunately.
I had a very good relationship and continue to have a good relationship with the former president of the United States, Barack Obama. I ironically also knew previous president Donald Trump as well, because I worked in politics before I was in PR as a top aide here in New York, and you could not do business in New York without knowing him. And I know the difference between the struggles that the two men had to deal with, especially one being a different kind of first because of the color of his skin. What is it like to be the first Black president of Rutgers University?
You know, I know exactly what you're asking, and I'm gonna answer it in a little bit different way. Heck, if I know. I mean, I get out of bed looking like this. You know, I've always gotten out of bed looking like this.
Me too.
so for me, it's just a normal day. But I do recognize, of course, I recognize the importance symbolically, institutionally, put in other adjectives in there about what it means to have the first Black president of the institution, especially one that predates the establishment of the country. It's a big deal. When I was asked this question at my first press conference, after I was named, I answered, paraphrasing myself, like, look, I'm pretty confident of my abilities. I think I can do a lot of great things. But I also don't think I'm so special that it makes sense that I'm the first African-American who should be leading Rutgers. It's 254 years old. There have been plenty of people far more talented than I am who could have been the first 10 years earlier, 30 years earlier, 40 years earlier. And yet here we are. So hats off to the Board of Governors who saw an opportunity in me and wanted to have me lead the institution. I appreciate that vote of confidence. What it means in practical sense is that whole communities of people who have never seen someone who looked like them in these positions see somebody who looks like them, and that means something, you know. Now, yes. What it means depends on the situation. So one of the challenges, and I know Barack Obama faced this, is a level of expectation of delivery on issues that are so-called related to the Black community that no one person can reasonably deliver upon. Like, you got to build a system and a culture and a practice and set of policies that would deliver on it. One person can't do it. So there is sort of a kind of a ridiculous burden that comes along with this incredible honor of being the first Black person to do anything. It's just a little more complicated in my place and situation because it's such a public position.
Right.
But that's okay. I mean, that's the deal. You know, like I said, I wake up every day looking like this. So, you know, let's just get to work is my attitude.
And what of the converse of that? What of Barack Obama liked to say on a daily basis, and he reminded his staff, obviously our job is to govern all of the people. And with that Blackness that doesn't go away, and he wakes up every morning to be who he is, there's a different expectation, at least most people would think so, for those who aren't used to seeing not just someone that looks like them there, but the majority who is quickly becoming the minority, let's say powerful white men, who are not used to, and some of them might even be honest enough to tell you, I've never been in a meeting that was run with a Black man in power. What is that like?
Well, no one's been that honest with me. They've held their tongue, but I know it's the case. I mean, I know I was just on a Zoom call earlier today with a few other, two other Black presidents and an Asian American former president of university. And we were talking about the script that's written the moment each of us would walk in the room. That there's the presumption that because I look a certain way or have a certain gender or have a certain sexuality or am a certain height, they've written the script within 5 seconds. And we all do that, right? It's just that some scripts are more powerful than others, are more controlling than others. So I'm pragmatic about it. Like, I get all that. What I counter with, I suppose, is that I tap into the full range of my humanity, that I don't have Black thoughts, I have thoughts. You know, I don't have a Black way of like blinking, I blink my eyes. I mean, there I mean, the way I see the world is colored by, and I use that word intentionally, a certain set of experiences, yes. But the fact is, we share more in common than we don't. We love, we want to take care of our own, I'm talking here, our children if we have them, our families. Yeah. We want food, we want clothing, we want shelter. Anything other than that is, kind of less important. So I try to meet people at the level of basic shared desires. And in the process, inevitably, it seems, while they may not say, I've never met anybody or been in a room with someone like you, a Black person, inevitably they'll say something that is kind of code for that.
Yes.
And it may be, as you remember, Biden, he's so articulate and clean. Well, heck, if someone's running for president, I would expect them to be articulate, frankly. Someone who's, trained academically where he was, I would expect him to be articulate. Clean, well, that's just good habits. But there are, when people would make reference to me about a certain place, like, oh, I know that, I've been there, and that kind of can destabilize people. I'm like, yeah, Black folks know lots of things. We go lots of places. We have lots of experiences. And given the fact, if this person's involved in higher ed at some level, whether as a donor or something like that, I'm in the world of higher ed, and really of very high level research oriented higher ed. The fact is we are going to be overlapping in some ways, because the world is just too small. Like, we will know the same people. And that moment, when that happens, is the telling moment. If people how quickly they can recalibrate that script, like, oh, so he knows this person at these places. The other thing that helps me out, frankly, even though I had no success playing football in college, I was on the football team, the fact that I was, a varsity athlete in college changes the script for some people. Because I have that, and I have a PhD, that, and I write books. I cover a lot of territory in doing that. And the fact I grew up in a military family. So I cover lots of bases with people. And I just try to find their base and say, yeah, I share some of that. Let's get to business.
In the 60s, there was a lot of challenges on colleges and university campuses around America. And Rutgers has a history that I read about, similar to Columbia, where I went to school, where some students decided it was time for them to not just have their voice heard, but to take over a building and hope to bring more attention to an issue. Not only reflecting on that history and your opinion of that from a Rutgers perspective or an American perspective as a historian, I'm a crisis guy. Is there any concern for those types of things today as issues continue to get heated? And how do you grapple with the difference between the issues of the 60s and the way they dealt with it and what might be an option for students today?
The admissions process was actually intentionally avoiding the recruitment of Black students. In fact, a large number of applicants that had come in from African American students were actually put aside and treated differently.
So the groundwork was laid for members of the Black Organization of Students to take over Conklin Hall on the Newark campus of Rutgers University. 40 years later, a commemoration was held.
We felt we were jeopardizing our careers or our education, and also there was always the hint, based upon what had happened in '67, that we could be violently reacted to by the governmental forces.
Stand up with us now. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. All of you, stand up. If you want to be heard, stand up.
If you take a look around this room, you'll see all around the periphery the flags of over 75 countries. This campus is now listed by U.S. News and World Report as the most diverse university campus in the country, in the United States. And so the distance from a time when it used to be a lily white campus to the point now where it's the most diverse campus in the country is an extraordinary distance that we've come. And I think those students at that time were the ones that gave this the push, and we owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude.
It's a great question. Yeah, we're concerned about it, absolutely. I mean, when Derek Chauvin was on trial and the verdict was, they announced the verdict was going to be coming quicker than any of us thought. And none of us knew what to expect.
Right.
We had a quick sort of a crisis meeting, like we got to get a communications out right away, because I and others were anticipating what I'll call a mixed verdict. And we're anticipating riots, thinking of the upheaval from the 60s and the 70s. That didn't happen. I mean, thank God that didn't happen for many different reasons. But the fact is, students are animated in ways they haven't been in 50, 60 years now. And by and large, I think that's a good thing. I don't always agree with them, but the fact is they're pushing, they're questioning, they're challenging, often in very substantive ways. That's important. And that's just part of a learning and growing process. For me, the difference in how to deal with that is that, and it goes back to something you asked me, I think, with the first question about my own background and what I bring to the table, is that, I'll just cite a couple of examples from my past very quickly. When students, I was previously taught and was an administrator at Yale and was an administrator at Northwestern universities. And on both campuses, there were moments when students of color and their allies were really upset about a situation. And we're making a lot of noise about it. And the trustees were not happy about it. And in both instances, I talked to the trustees and said, look, you may not like their method, but they are doing exactly what they've been trained to do. They're asking very hard questions of an institution, and they're raising their voice. People were saying, well, this is, they are silencing other people. They're doing these things. I'm like, actually, no, they're not. They are raising their voices. I mean, they weren't burning anything. They were just speaking up. I said, I don't like what they said or what they did. But what they're doing is a free speech act. It's just that it's speech we don't like. But you know what? That's tough. I mean, we are in the business of creating a space for speech we don't like so that we can all learn to do something better. So my approach, I think, might be different from maybe the presidents of the 60s who were just like, shut it down. It's like, no. We brought these students here. They are part of us. They're going to make us better. We need to listen to them. That doesn't mean they're right, but we need to listen to them. And that act of being engaged in that way, of making it clear that they, in this case, the activated students, are doing something that's in a tradition that's important to this country, we need to take it seriously. And so it's really about engaging the students where they are, trying to understand where they're coming from, and educate them to the extent that they need to be. And also maybe educating ourselves to the extent we need to be as university leaders. That's where I'm oriented.
Final two questions. I know New Jersey pretty well. I know America pretty well, at least from a political perspective and a communications perspective. New Jersey is a tough place to govern, a tough place to work, a tough place to be a leader. The governor has certainly learned that. Some would say he had a stricter and more focused ability with some issues early on. And then when he got a little beat up with some of the issues because he realized, wow, there's a lot of people here who don't think the way I do, he felt he needed to come down the middle and be more of a compromiser. Do you feel some of that pressure as well within New Jersey? Of course, your student body and your stakeholders come from beyond New Jersey. But what is it like to be in the midst of that in a state like New Jersey with a country and a state that are pretty much divided on a lot of issues in society today?
It's a sort of hard for me to answer because I joined as a COVID president. So we moved here end of June last year. Rutgers has a census of over 1,200 buildings. I've been in 25 of them. And most of that's been in the last few months, post-vaccination, post things beginning to open up. So right. I really have a very limited set of experiences to the rough and tumble of New Jersey politics. It'll come, I know that. But for me, one, I've had the honeymoon. We've all been in a COVID crisis together. And I think especially because I'm from out of state, although I have family already in northern and southern New Jersey, I'm an out of state person who didn't have ties to Rutgers beyond a professor and having colleagues here. So I'm everybody's friend coming in the door. That won't last. I know that. I'm talking in terms of the governor's office, the Senate, and the Assembly. I get along with everybody. The real test, ask me that question in 2 years and we'll see, because I will have stumbled, certainly. I'll have had to stake positions out that are unpopular, and then we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Final question is, ironically, about the pandemic and COVID, not just past, but we're still in it. The Delta variant is a tough and tumble. We are still learning about it. There are a lot of people who have still not gotten vaccinated. Tell me if you agree with this assessment and what your plans might be for the fall. Since January of last year, I've been doing crisis work around the globe, not just here, with leaders. And I told them early on, this going back message that everyone had, even back in January of last year, before it was really a big story here. In March, we really started getting more public messages. But there were researchers and scientists and WHO and CDC that were having conversations with leaders. And I said, getting back to normal will include 4 major legs of the chair. Safe childcare, safe schools, safe public transportation anywhere in the world, and safe office towers. Do you agree with that assessment? And if you do, what does it look like for a university this fall where we have to make decisions? Some schools, for example, we're already seeing on TV, are opening in the middle of August before we get into September. And we have changes that are happening at the speed of light with the variant as we speak on a calendar that doesn't have much time.
I think those 4 legs of the chair make abundant sense to me. I was on the Governor Murphy's Restart Recovery Commission, and one of the very early conversations is about, and this was April of 2020, May of 2020, there were conversations about how to clean schools. I'm talking K through 12 spaces. And people were trying to sort that out. And then someone said, well, if we can't get the buses clean, it's pointless. And then I learned about how the bus system worked in New Jersey. And you start seeing the spiraling complexity of trying to get to reopening. For me, it's really simple. You get vaccinated. We've mandated for our students because they are the ones in congregate living and congregate dining. And I've been getting very pointed emails about that, and got a petition today, in fact, challenging me on this for legal reasons, ethical reasons, and organizational reasons. We are steadfast, though. To me, it's pretty darn simple. We get vaccinated. With the staff and faculty, I think they should get vaccinated as well. We have a little more complications here about mandating it. If it were easy for me to do, I'd mandate it in a half second. Because we are lucky to live in a highly vaccinated state, that is in New Jersey, where we're looking at probably 70% of the people who are eligibly vaccinated already are vaccinated. It is, if I see opening up as an easier path forward, our students will be vaccinated or they will not be on campus. And our faculty and staff, by and large, will be vaccinated, 70%. So I think net, we're going to be looking at a community that's about, when you look in percentages of population, about 85% vaccinated. It's going to be hard to do much better than that. So for me, the answer to these complexities is pretty straightforward. I mean, we know, science knows what the answer is. It is the way it's been politicized is making this so incredibly difficult. Now, you talked about all these other aspects that are related to opening up, and safe towers, safe health, childcare, safe classrooms, and I forgot one, but
public transportation.
Transportation, yeah. When I think of other universities, we are a flat campus by and large. I have several friends who are presidents of New York City universities, and they're vertical. That's a whole different infrastructure, presents a whole different challenge to them. Right. Elevators, airflows, all these kinds of things. So this virus and how you respond to it is situationally dependent. At Rutgers, we think we've got our hands on it pretty well. Not perfect, but pretty well. So I think we'll be opening up just fine.
And one quick follow-up. Large groups, so a lot of parties where people congregate in larger groups, football games, outdoor sporting events. Do you think that will be an issue with the variant, or is it going to be okay to come together in a stadium, for example?
It won't be perfect, but it'll be okay. The fact is, because we're mandating the vaccine, look, we are not going to stop 18 and 19-year-olds from having parties. They are built to have parties. They're going to have them. That's why the vaccine is so critical, because that is the best guarantee of their safety. Stadium, the football stadium, it's outdoors. If it was an indoor facility, and especially with a smaller airflow capacity, that'd be a whole different kind of conversation. But I'm saying this on July 26th. Where are we in August 17th? I don't know. Delta is that, and then whatever the next variant is, because people won't get vaccinated, I don't know. So that's where we are today. We'll see where we are in a month's time, and a month's time after that. I think we're going to be okay. I think the real concern I have is what happens when the weather gets cold in New Jersey and we start moving indoors for large events. That I don't have the answer to yet. Nobody does, except for if we're having a basketball game today, we'd be wearing masks inside. I'm sure of that. That just seems prudent. And it also seems like a minimal ask in this particular moment. To be continued.
I think that's a wise answer. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And I know my friend Tom Mattia would say thank you as well. He's a great man and a proud Rutgers graduate, as he likes to tell me often. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Our t-shirt for the day this week is a great organization called Today I'm Brave. They also have something called Brave Camps for inner city kids, and a terrific organization that is helping society. So we thank them so much for sending us a t-shirt. I thank President Holloway for coming and telling us all about Rutgers University and the challenges they're also going through dealing with today's society from a racism perspective, from a diversity, equality, and inclusion perspective. I will say this one thing. It's difficult to compromise on some issues that deal with ethics and morality. Always a very tough thing for any leader. And it's one thing to say that you're open to talking about issues, but to make a decision before you have the ongoing talking and studying of, let's say, for example, the name of Rutgers University, and saying that we are not going to change the name. Let's see how that plays out in the future, because just how he said he has an open mind to see what's going to happen a month from now and a month after that regarding the pandemic, my advice to him as a crisis counselor would be, I think it's smart to be open-minded about a potential name change too. If the heat continues to be as hot as it seems to be about a slave owner name still being tied to the university, as well as not just listening to the students and other stakeholders, but also being open to potential change from their point of view. But we thank him for being on the show. He had some great messages. Rutgers is an excellent university. Let's see how they move forward with some of the issues that they're grappling with right now. Thank you so much for tuning in to Reputations in Crisis and listening also. You can find our show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. And remember, less head work, more heart work. Peace. Until next week, this is Reputations in Crisis with Mike Paul, the Rep Doc. Thank you.